Hello again. I am happy to see you again. Today, I wanted to talk about something. I wanted to talk about classics. A lot of classics are widely known, but they're not widely understood. A lot of classics, especially the ones that people had to read when they were back in middle and high school, a lot of these classics are thought about in a skewed way, in a misinterpreted way, or just most often a generalized, simplified version that isn't accurate whatsoever. So I assume if you were interested enough to click on this video that you are probably a reader and hopefully you read things critically and think deeply about what you are reading. But I might just confirm what you thought about it as well. But I just wanted to dig into some themes on some books that are often simplified and just talk more deeply about things that maybe have been skewed by the general public. So I have 8 books that I wanted to talk to you today about, and just dig into some themes. I first wanted to start with the book that inspired this video because it is Halloween time. So I'm talking about Frankenstein. Frankenstein is not about a monster, a green monster with bolts in his neck. No, it's not about being chased out of town with pitchforks and torches. I don't even think there's a pitchfork in this book. And it's not about brainless killing of everybody in town and walking around like this. No. Frankenstein, as a novel, is about so much more. It is about humanity and want and loneliness and creation and playing at God. People always talk about the creature of this story being the monster, but he presents as the most human being in this story. He wants love and empathy and companionship. Victor, the doctor, on the other hand, shows no accountability and no empathy whatsoever. So who really is a monster here? And so Mary Shelley, with this story, is kind of presenting this idea that through this doctor's obsession with creating new life, he found out that through the end, he lost everything trying to play at God, through his eventual deaths of loved ones, through his suffering that seemed to go on forever, even though this is a very short book. He lost everything. So Mary Shelley is kind of asking the question, just because we can play God, just because we can do something, should we really do it? And it also looks at nature versus nurture. It's not, the monster wasn't born evil, inherently evil. Whenever he was, maybe born's not the right word, maybe brought to life is. Whenever the creature was brought to life, he was innocent. He tried to find love. He tried to find companionship. He tried to learn language. He tried to, connect with people, connect with society. But the society that he had poor interactions with made him evil, made him cruel. So it's society brings him to do these evil things. And also, he is just a little bit brute and isn't thinking about things in any nuanced sense. But, this rejection is really what shapes the monster as a person. Again, Shelley's also just kind of asking the question, do we make people the way they are, or are they born that way? Because her argument through this is that we make people evil. We judge people, we reject people, we turn people away, even people that, have love in their hearts to give and have something to add to society. We can make them cruel by the way that we treat them. And my last point on this on this subject is Mary Shelley wrote this when she was 18. In 1818, and she was, a young girl in 1818. This isn't just, spooky Halloween writing. This is really revolutionary stuff to be writing about. Questioning human arrogance and patriarchal societies, and, writing this is an incredibly powerful statement. So this book is typically generalized, I mean, largely by movies and similar medias that have made it, you know, a monster that just walks around like this. But you know, this book is much, much, much more, you know, the more you think about this, the more you come up with. The creature's portion, like his monologue in this story, is some of the most beautiful writing I have ever read before. This book, that monster's part is so very good. The doctor's parts are a little bit dreadful just because, you know, it's so self-loathing. And so it's it does slog on with that much self-loathing. But that is a very important book to read and to look deeply into. The next book that I want to talk about is Kafka's Metamorphosis. I have seen a lot of posts on the internet, and you know, the comments are filled with, "This is so Kafka-esque," and it just vaguely has something to do with a cockroach. I don't think people understand what Kafka was getting at here. I think that anyone that actually read this would understand, but I think that, you know, I had to read Metamorphosis whenever I was 16, and I'll tell you, I didn't really fully understand what was going on. But again, this is a book that I think is just really generalized about a man turning into a cockroach, and I think that a lot of people just believe that this is some surreal, absurd story, and that's kind of the whole point, is just, it's absurd. But it is about more. So in this story, the main character, Gregor, wakes up transformed into a bug. So he wakes up completely useless to his family. And as his family finds out that he's not useful anymore, he can't provide for them anymore, he can't, you know, provide fully for them anymore because none of them seem to work a job or do anything important, they cast him off. He's useless. So, you know, I think a lot of people, whenever they read this book, whenever they're really young or whenever they have to read it and it's not by choice, you know, I think that just this turning into a cockroach thing, you believe that the family just thinks that Gregor is, you know, gross. Ooh, he's a bug. Of course we don't like him. But what Kafka's getting at here is that, you know, it's his usefulness to the family and being this, you know, cog in the working class machine. That's what makes him useful in society. And the moment that you're not useful to society, you're worthless to everybody. Even the people who are supposed to love you. Even the people that you have shown love to by completely taking care of them. So as long as Gregor is providing for his family, he's seen as useful. As long as he's working a job within the job market, he's seen as useful. And so Kafka's kind of asking the question, if you can't work, do you matter to anybody? And that's, you know, this surreal feeling that he's presenting with this story is a lot more than just turning into gross bug. Next, Catcher in the Rye. This book often gets a bad rep on the internet, and I'm really not sure why, because I think this is a fantastic depiction of struggling as a teenager. I mean, I imagine that, you know, boy teenagers have a better connection with this than I did, but I think that it, you know, it is an accurate portrayal, especially of a kid who is, you know, really going through something poor. Everyone thinks that Holden Caulfield is this, you know, privileged, you know, just dramatic teenager, you know, causing problems for no reason, you know, just because he can, just because everybody's a phony, you know, but I mean, this is really about a kid who's really struggling. He went through a really traumatic event in his family, and this is just kind of him spiraling and trying to get himself back upright. He's trying to make sense of this new world that he's finding himself in that suddenly feels fake and just phony and just overall unbearable. And Holden Caulfield does not hate everything. He's terrified of growing up. I mean, that's what the title Catcher in the Rye is trying to say. he sees adulthood as being corrupt and fake and phony, and so he wants to protect the purity and innocence of what being a child is. And he feels like he's at this point where he's kind of stuck in the middle, where he's turning into this phony life, this fake life. Say hi to Leroy. But he's coming into this fake life that, he wants to protect the innocence and the purity of children. So he doesn't hate everything. He's not just being rebellious just to be rebellious. I mean, everything that he's doing is incredibly purposeful. So in the end, Holden is trying to act like, I don't care. But every single page is screaming, please understand me, please listen to me. So this story is an incredibly accurate depiction of what it's like to, be a teen, especially one that's really struggling. And I think that this book just gets a bad rep in general. This book is very good. Next, Leroy and I wanted to talk about Animal Farm. Because Animal Farm is often boiled down into just talking animals teach about how communism is bad. But it's not just about communism. It's about, how any revolution can turn into something very dark very quickly. It's kind of, just a call against all authoritarian, states. So people read Animal Farm and they think it's just a call to action to take down the Soviet Union, which it is. I mean, that is exactly what it is. But Orwell is also speaking to how any revolution can turn very bad very quickly whenever power is centralized. So these animals, they take over a tyrannic state and then create one themselves. And it also does really show, and this isn't largely interpreted, I think a lot of people remember, the all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I think everybody remembers that. But just an incredibly important theme in here is that, how propaganda can change truth and alter truth and make you forget what, your original purpose was. So what makes the pigs so powerful in Animal Farm is that they aren't using force, they aren't taking over, they aren't making a coup, they're using language. They're rationalizing their eventual takeover. And so it happens so slowly and so rationally that the other animals they can't really stop it. So in the end, I think that, this book is generalized as anti-communist literature, which it is, but, it's a call against any takeover, and it really puts into incredibly simple terms how it's possible for any takeover to happen if power is centralized in the correct way, or I guess in the not correct way. Next, Leroy and I wanted to talk about Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This one is really about the American dream, and it is about how the American dream often fails for a lot of people, and the American dream isn't made for everybody, because for a lot of people, it's simply not possible. So George and Lenny's dream of owning land someday isn't about, just the land. It's about the dignity and the safety that comes with that. And the fact that, they won't be able to get to that someday just shows that the American dream isn't made for the greatly poor. It isn't made for the marginalized. It isn't made for the mentally disabled. It's just not possible. So this book isn't just about, guy likes rabbits, guy work on farm. I mean, this is, in a very quick sense, a really powerful story on who is held back from the American dream. So every character in this book feels really isolated, whether emotionally or, physically or just wealth-wise. These people are really isolated from everyone around them and really disconnected with the other people, even if they live within a close proximity. So it does show how people, really deeply long for connection and how they kind of rarely get it. And even with so many people in this story longing for connection, they still can't find it within each other. This book really packs a punch it's just a little over 100 pages. It's so short, but it really gets you. Because this book does not waste a single sentence. This book wastes no time to get its point across, and it does so quietly and so powerfully, and just, wow, is this a good book. So I know that this is one that is often read in schools. I never had to read it for school, but I think that rereading this as an adult would really, bring out things that you wouldn't have noticed whenever you were 15. Lord of the Flies is a book that, again, I didn't have to read whenever I was in school, but I know that this is, one of the very popular ones that are often read about in school. And, I can see why teachers like this book so much. The vocabulary is wonderful. The story is interesting on surface level, especially to boys who are often hard to get to connect with literature. So this book is very, very good in the classroom, but I think that there is so much that you just couldn't understand whenever you were forced to read it in school, that I think that this is an incredibly valuable reread. Because I think that this book is often, just kind of looked at as boys going savage on an island. Oh, that's just what boys do, boys being boys. But, thinking deeply, this book is about so much more. So it's not really about savagery winning over civilization. It is, more about just how fragile civilization really is. I mean, a civilization can only be as strong as its weakest link. And so humans, in Golding's eyes, aren't inherently evil. They aren't inherently bad, but, with just a few bringing down the society, it's possible, for a society to crumble, for savagery to win. So this book isn't, a model against idealism. It's a model for realism. It's a model for things, civilizations can crumble very, very quickly, even if you're originally set up with what seems like a very good plan. So whenever you strip away structure and accountability and parents, things can turn to fear and evil very quickly. So I know that I've gotten a couple comments on my TikTok page, because I talk about this book a lot. I love this book. And I've gotten a lot of comments that say, whenever I had to read that in school, my teacher drove it into the ground, so I hate that book. I think that this is the type of book that you absolutely would find so much value in and rereading it later, because you can truly appreciate what Golding was doing here. And this book is so good. So I think that, I urge you to try this book again, even if your teacher drove it into the ground, even if you hate this book, whenever you had to read it whenever you were 15. It is so good, and there is so much more to think about. Next, I wanted to talk about Brave New World. Maybe misunderstood isn't the perfect term to go about this, but I think that it is often just kind of tossed in to the dystopia category, and that's just kind of the end and the long and the short of it. But this is a lot different than a typical dystopian novel. Obviously, this is about a society that, is inherently dystopian, but it's largely different from, a 1984 or an Animal Farm or, I don't know, Hunger Games. It's kind of in a category by itself. What I think is so different and so unique and so scary about Brave New World is it's not about government surveillance. There's no big brother watching these people. There's no oppressor holding these people down. They choose to live in this society because they are so comfortable with, just entertainment and drugs and just being comfortable, so that they stop caring about art and love and companionship and just things that we believe make humans human. That's what was so, jarring about this story is people are comfortable just being comfortable. They would rather choose doing nothing and being nothing and just being a cog in a machine than they would, to become great artists, to share their experiences, to share their emotions, to think about things deeply. It's incredible how the society can work and be perpetuated and continue on with zero oppressors at hand. So where dystopias are typically, we think war and combating against a government that's oppressing, here Huxley shifts the gears and shows us a society where everybody is happy, where everybody is comfortable. And that's the horror behind it. Because whenever these people are comfortable, whenever these people are just fine being constantly entertained by technologies and drugs and, this and that, they're okay not questioning anything. This book really, predicted how people can be okay with just shallow pleasures and mindless entertainment and constant entertainment so that it just replaces thought and it replaces questioning. Sound familiar? And these characters aren't necessarily brainwashed. They're kind of just conditioned to not care. Before these people are even born, they're conditioned to avoid death, to avoid, being uncomfortable. And so these people are just okay with their slavery. It's the conditioning, it's the, just mindless, brainless accepting of what is happening to you and what is happening around you, and that is what is so scary about this book. So maybe misunderstood, maybe isn't the right term, but I think that this is generally thrown into a category that doesn't accurately describe it. Because yes, this is dystopian. This is a society that I sure wouldn't want to live in. But I think that this book creates its own category because there isn't an oppressor. And that is what is so dystopian about this. The last book that I wanted to talk about is Albert Camus' The Stranger. I think a lot of people finish this book and just think, that's it? But that's Albert Camus' point. That's the point of him writing this story as an absurdist philosopher. He wants you to think about the meaninglessness of life and how you combat the complete indifference of the world. So, if you don't know what this story is, it basically starts off as a man who goes to his mother's funeral and finds himself with a complete lack of care to be there. And then he meets up with this odd friend of his and they go to the beach and he senselessly murders somebody because the sun is a little bit too hot on the beach. So obviously that premise alone is pretty absurd. So whenever he kills a man for no clear reason, his trial seems to focus on his lack of empathy than the actual death, the actual murder. So Camus is really showing us how society is always looking for answers. It's always looking for meaning, even when there isn't any. So it kind of appears like our main character doesn't go on trial for murder. He goes on trial for not playing the right part, for not, crying at his mom's funeral, for not caring about what he did, for not caring about God or shedding any tears over his situation. He's not playing the part. He's not playing the game. And so the system is, punishing him for not playing into this performance, for playing his role, for doing what he's supposed to do, for caring when he's supposed to care. So a lot of people, whenever they read this book, they kind of just think that life is absurd, and that's just what Camus is saying. But instead, he's not saying that everything is meaningless, nothing matters. He's saying that because everything is meaningless, we have to create our own meaning. So whenever our main character accepts the inevitability of his death, whenever he accepts that life is meaningless and nothing matters to him, he then feels free. Now, I will say, I don't agree with absurdist philosophy. I believe there is meaning to everything. But I do think that that is a very interesting look at a philosophy that is largely different from my own. And I think that this is boiled down into just literally just being absurd. But there's a purpose to what Camus is doing here. He is saying that we create our meaning. We do what we want to, and that is what gains us freedom in this absurd world. So there is more to this than surface level. So in the end, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking. I'm not saying that, my understanding, my interpretation of these things are better than anybody else's. I'm just saying that oftentimes these are the books that are read in middle and high school classrooms, and a lot of what people remember are a really generalized and inaccurate perception of what that book is truly about. So I'm hoping that through this video, I urge you to reread books that you read whenever you had to, whenever you were forced in class, whenever you were younger, and reread them now with an older and a wiser mind, because I think that you will find a lot of value in these books and for what these books have to offer. So thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you have anything to add to what I said, because this isn't that long of a video. I can't unpack everything. So let me know if you have anything else you want to add to these books. I would love to reply to you. Let me know if you have other books that you think would be useful to add to this list, books that you believe that nobody else understands. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you next weekend. Thank you so much for watching.